militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I am glad you're with us on the program today. So we don't have any Supreme Court decisions to talk about, but boy, there is a lot going on in the courts of appeals at the moment. Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Illinois going to be hearing oral arguments in the Illinois ban on so-called assault weapons and large capacity magazines today. And on Wednesday, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals heard oral arguments in a case dealing with a law. This is so bizarre. A law passed by the state of California ostensibly to prevent minors from being exposed to marketing materials that will persuade them or convince them to purchase a firearm when they're a minor, which is, against the law and supposedly impossible to do in California with universal background checks and 10-day waiting period. This is really an attack on the speech rights of Second Amendment supporters. And yesterday's hearing apparently did not go well for the state of California. We're going to be talking about this with attorney Anna Barvir of Michel and Associates, who was one of the attorneys working extensively on this case. She'll be joining us here in just a moment. Before we get to that, however, Biden's America is crushing us. You've got companies laying off tens of thousands of workers, one after the other. Americans working two jobs just to get by. Inflation pushing hardworking families to the brink. Just look at the price of lunch meat the next time you go to the grocery store, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And a digital dollar could be coming down the pipeline to completely destroy our way of life. The truth is, you need a plan. You know it, and I know it. And that's why you should call Goldco, so you can diversify your savings and investments with gold and silver before things get worse. They're a six-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year with thousands of five-star reviews, and they've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. They're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last, and if you call them today, qualified callers will get a free Ronald Reagan half-ounce silver coin. So don't wait. Call Goldco at 855-412-3806 today. That's 855-412-3806. So let's delve into the Ninth Circuit's oral arguments. Now, keep in mind, by the way, the Ninth Circuit, since Heller, has yet to rule that any gun control law that's come before it is unconstitutional. They've upheld every single gun control law in California, Hawaii, Washington State, and Oregon that they have heard. But this might be the case that undoes that streak. Take a look and listen. Anna, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It is great to meet you virtually, and I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like yesterday was a very good day for you and the gun owners who are challenging this law in California, and a very, very bad day for California Attorney General Rob Bonta. That's the impression that I get. But I want to know your perspective. How do you think yesterday's oral arguments went?
It felt really positive. There was a really calm vibe, I think, in the courtroom. The judges seemed to really understand the position that we were putting forward about how, gun advertisements and not just gun advertisements, but all sorts of advertisements for products that one might use in the shooting sports, how, restricting those violates the First Amendment, and not just, and I think, and not even like under the strongest type of scrutiny you could have, but like even just as a commercial ad, which is not, currently in our jurisprudence, it's easier to uphold a law like that. But I think the court was really following why we were saying that even under that lower standard of scrutiny, that this law can't stand. It did feel like a little bit of a hot bench for the state, which we're not used to feeling sometimes over here in the Ninth Circuit. So it was definitely a good feeling yesterday.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, in the 15 years since Heller was handed down, the Ninth Circuit, we've seen some 3-judge panels say, yeah, this law is unconstitutional. But in every one of these cases, the en banc panel comes along and says, oh, no, this gun control law is fine. The Ninth Circuit has yet to find a gun control law unconstitutional. Now, this is not specifically a gun control law, right? Because this is basically a First Amendment case, not a pure Second Amendment case.
That's right. The state through AB 2571 was basically trying to, what it looks like to us as a nefarious purpose is to basically bankrupt the firearms industry with the threat of these types of lawsuits or the muzzling of their speech. And so they go after the First Amendment, but as a result, I think it is an indirect result of that, but just as intentional, they're going after the Second Amendment too. So, with regard to what the Ninth Circuit, the larger court might do with regard to bringing it en banc, it's hard to say. To me, this law is so offensive to the First Amendment. It could squeak by without the Ninth Circuit calling for an en banc review. But I wouldn't be surprised because it does deal with Second Amendment issues.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's a strategy. Tell me if you think I'm entirely off base, but I think there's a strategy on the part of gun control advocates, and that would include the Attorney General of California in that group, to kind of play keep away from the Supreme Court as long as possible with the current makeup of the court. It seems to me like, there's this desire to let's not let the justices get a hold of these cases if we can help it. So let's kick it to an en banc. Let's try to drag out these appeals as long as we possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to make sense for them because the makeup of the court is entirely unfriendly to, I think, obviously to that position. But there's only so long that they can do that. And
right.
Some of the courts, I mean, we've seen some cases come out recently. Some of the courts are like, here, take this decision. We want you to.
Right. So what makes obviously from a gun owner's perspective, there's a lot that's offensive about AB 2571. But what, in your opinion, makes this so offensive to the First Amendment? The state of California says, look, we're not trying to kill anybody's speech rights. We're just saying that you can't market guns to kids. What's wrong with that?
Right. If you're asking me, I'm going to wear two hats on this. For me, it's most offensive, I think, personally, and as someone who interacts with the gun community on a regular basis as an attorney for these issues. The most offensive part is reading through the legislative history, and you can see what the state was really trying to do there. It's littered with references to the problem of encouraging young shooters and passing down these messages. The state relied heavily in the legislative history on a report called Start Them Young from the Violence Policy Center that just shreds my client, the junior sports magazines, as well as the NSSF and the NRA, talks about them being in cahoots to create a new generation of shooters because all of their old white men are gone. They're dying off. So we need to make, put guns in the hands of babies. I mean, that's the rhetoric that you can see in this legislative history. So for me, that's what's most offensive. And I would hope the court sees that that's obviously a viewpoint discrimination that can't withstand the First Amendment. But I think where we can win anyway, and is also super offensive about this law, and I think is probably where the court's going to go, they don't necessarily need to talk about the viewpoint discrimination that's there and get a strict scrutiny for us to win. We can talk about this is just, okay, all right, we believe you. This is entirely about ads to prevent unlawful possession or purchase of firearms by minors. Sure, that's what it's about, and it always was. The court still sees, and I think the court still sees, and I think we made a really strong argument yesterday that even if that's true, what you've done is what the state has done has pulled in so much more speech than that is protected, and it isn't just targeting ads that were put in, teen magazine to say go buy guns illegally in California. Like, if that's what we were talking about, I don't think anyone would have a problem because no one's doing that. But what the speech that they're going after is lawful speech. It's about lawful purchases of firearms, speech to adults about what their children might be able to lawfully use, and speech to children about what they might want to purchase when they become adults. So this becomes such an overly broad law that it couldn't even withstand intermediate scrutiny. But at the same time, and I mentioned it in the hearing yesterday, it's also under-inclusive, right? Because the legislative history talks about how slick advertising to children is pushed into video games and to movies and to children's books, and yet all of those industries are exempt from the law. Mm-hmm. So these are the things that are offensive under the First Amendment.
Yeah, Hollywood could come out with a movie tomorrow that features a 12-year-old action hero, using an AR-15 for 90 minutes on the silver screen. And Rob Bond is not going to blink an eye. But I want to give you an example and tell me if this would run afoul of AB 2571. I taught my kids to shoot with a Cricket 22 single shot rifle. Are ads for those, even in magazines that are aimed at adults, ad for, guns that are designed for, my, at the time, 10-year-old child, for me to teach them how to be safe and responsible. Would that ad run afoul of California's law?
100%. The law is written so that this courts that look at whether or not a law is violating the rule, whether an ad is violating the law, is a quote totality of the circumstances test. And the state law gives a list of things that one might look to determine whether or not something is reasonably attractive to a minor, and thus in violation of the law. And things like obviously things like, they're talking about putting, slapping guns on toys and saying, buy this particular firearm. But it's more than that. It's also ads in magazines that would feature children. So if you have a cricket ad where, dad is teaching child to use that cricket, that would be a violation. And also when the ads portray firearms or firearm related products that are made in sizes or colors that might be attractive to children. So if if cricket is making a firearm that is this shit, and we know that it is, it's
right.
That's what it's designed for. That is the size that's appropriate for the smaller shooter, including children. That would be in violation of law, even if it's in an adults only magazine. Excuse me. And the thing, and it's funny you bring up cricket, especially because, again, in that legislative history, they talk about that particular firearm expressly. They mention that firearm and how offensive it is that these children should be able to access it.
And so again, I mean, you're right. This clearly is about not just protecting kids, but about chilling the free speech of adults, of Second Amendment advocates who do want to pass on not only the tradition and the right to keep and bear arms, but frankly, how to be safe and responsible with firearms. That's maybe one of the most galling things about this law is it encourages and incentivizes ignorance, right? I mean, look, California, with all of its gun control laws, I'm still seeing stories every day, 15, 16-year-old gang members who are illegally getting a hold of guns. And the state of California apparently shrugs its, collective shoulders at that. But they want to go after parents who would dare educate their kids on how to be safe and responsible, who would provide that training, who maybe would, encourage their kids to take part in the shooting sports. All of that is seen as more taboo, it seems, than, teen gang members getting caught with a gun, because they typically get a slap on the wrist and they're sent back out on the streets. But, a magazine like Junior Shooting Sports or, Safari Club International, trying to encourage youth hunting, that's a bigger problem, it seems like, anyway, for the state of California.
And I think that was what I see from the legislative history of AB 2571. And while the state, after being sued, tried to amend it through AB 160 to allow for promotion and ads that promote events like hunting events or youth competitions, it still was very clear that it wasn't going to include speech at those events. So as I'm sure you're aware, those sorts of events rely necessarily on that type of commercial speech, those, vendors to come in and say, hey, this is a really good, holster to use. Holsters would be part of that because it's a firearm accessory under the law. So, or this is a really good ear protection. Again, that's an accessory under the law. So this sorts of commercial speech can't happen at those events. So it shuts those events down, and it's by design. I would love to give the state the benefit of the doubt that that's not what they were trying to do, but the legislative history is 100% clear.
Yeah. So who was on the 3-judge panel yesterday? I know it was Judge Van Dyke, Judge Lee. Who was the third judge on this panel?
Judge N.R. Smith. He's been there a little while, senior status circuit judge.
Okay.
Very, very affable gentleman, came out and spoke with all the attorneys before. Little small talk. He made everybody in the courtroom feel really at ease. It was a great panel.
Good. And it seemed like the judges understood the issues at stake here.
I think so. And you could see that, by the way, if you had the opportunity to see the argument, like leading me down, I could have let it down myself, but the court was leading me down exactly what the standard is. And then the very probing questions, I think, that the court was asking the state to really get the state to be on the record as as what exactly ads are you attacking? And then how are you proving that those ads have anything to do with the concern that the state is putting forward, which is this justification of, well, there's these deaths or firearms are finding, kids are getting guns in their hands and shooting up places. So those are the issues. But the court didn't seem to follow that jump from here's an ad in Junior Sports Magazine to a mass shooting at a school. Like, they didn't see that. It didn't seem to me.
Well, no, in fact, it seemed almost the contrary. Like at one point, I think it was Judge Lee who asked the attorneys for the state, okay, well, could you ban ads that are attractive to minors that glorify violence when it comes to movies and video games, right? And the state of California said, well, I don't know, because the First Amendment comes into play there. And I think it was Judge Van Dyke who said, well, yeah, but we're talking about, the Second Amendment coming into play, in addition to the First Amendment coming into play with AB 2571. Again, the state of California, and this is nothing new, Anna, you've dealt with this for years, right? They view the bigger problem as legal gun ownership, right? If they can eradicate legal gun ownership, then somehow that'll have a trickle down effect on illegal gun possession. Right. And frankly, I think it's not only unconstitutional, I think it's a completely backwards approach, but right. It is good to hear that the panel yesterday seemed to understand and did seem to have some very serious questions for the state of California. What about the state of California's argument that, well, look, we ban alcohol and tobacco ads for minors, so why can't we regulate? You got to be 21 years of age to purchase a firearm in the state of California. Why can't we ban ads that similarly target or market firearms or accessories or even gun ownership to children?
I think there's a lot of reasons that those cases do support the state's argument in that, with regard to tobacco and alcohol and other types of things that we see as vices, right? But there are a lot of reasons those cases don't make sense in this context. And part of it, I think you already mentioned, is we're not talking about alcohol or tobacco, marijuana, brothels, or gambling. We're talking about firearms, ammunition, the things that one needs to participate in the shooting sports. This is Second Amendment protected conduct, and it's conduct that is not illegal for minors to engage in it, even in California. So in all cases, smoking a cigarette at 17 is against the law. Selling a cigarette to a child of 16 is against the law. It's not the case in California that minors cannot learn to use and shoot firearms legally with parental permission or under adult supervision. That's one reason that it's quite different. Plus, and you also mentioned this too, is we're talking about the First Amendment and how it kind of interacts with a Second Amendment product, as opposed to all ads about tobacco. While it's speech, it's not really political speech. An ad for a gun is political speech. It really is. It's telling you a viewpoint. It's not telling that you hate guns, I would suspect. So I think that there's a lot that goes into why those cases with regard to tobacco and alcohol, they just don't fit for the state. And instead, we want to try to get the court to see, and I think the court does see, that there's another line of cases that works here, and it has to deal with advertisements that are targeted to both adults and minors, because that's true here. It's not just advertisements that are for children. It's if they're reasonably attractive to children, even if the only recipient is a grown-up. So you're talking about ads to both, and you're talking about ads that deal with constitutionally protected products. And there's a line of cases with regard to ads for birth control, for contraceptives, that tell us that you can't go after speech. You can't restrict speech to both adults and minors for constitutionally protected conduct when there's something else when there's other non-speech related things you can do, the state can do to address its interests.
Yeah, including perhaps, a functional juvenile justice system in places like Los Angeles County, right? So, yeah, things of that nature. I'm actually, and this is so weird for me to say, but I'm actually looking forward to seeing what the Ninth Circuit has to say in this decision. Normally, I'm not. I'm kind of dreading what the Ninth Circuit will say, but I actually am looking forward to this. And I've got to ask you, I know that Chuck is in Illinois today, Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, holding a huge hearing on Illinois' ban on so-called the Sullivans and large capacity magazines. You all are so busy at Michel and Associates. Can you let us know, what are some of the other cases that you're working on right now?
My biggest, I guess, area right now, of course, I'm the lead attorney in Duncan, which is the large capacity so-called large capacity magazine challenge before Judge Benitez in San Diego, which is obviously the joy of my life to be the responsible attorney for that case, obviously, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And I'm also doing a lot of work that's both First and Second Amendment on protecting gun shows in California. I'm not sure if you're familiar. There was a series of laws, first at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, then at the Orange County Fair and Event Complex, and now it's all state-owned fairgrounds and places where they're not allowed to where excuse me, those venues are no longer allowed to contract with folks to allow for the sale of firearms, ammunition, or firearm precursor parts. And so it basically has the effect of banning all gun shows at those event centers. And so we have two lawsuits going on, one against the Del Mar Fairgrounds and one against Orange County. Excuse me. We have a motion to dismiss that's on appeal. We lost, and that's on appeal to the Ninth Circuit currently. And we have a motion for preliminary injunction that's waiting for decision in the in Judge Holcomb's court in Central District.
Okay. Well, thank you again for everything you're doing to protect these civil liberties and restore, frankly, the civil liberties of Californians, because a lot of these rights have already been lost. One last question for you. When do you think we're going to hear from Judge Benitez in Duncan? Because I've been kind of waiting, like what's going on here, Judge?
We've all been waiting, but I think we have to remember he took a lot. He asked for a lot of information and a lot of briefing, and it's in 4 different cases. So I suspect, he's a very thoughtful judge, and he gives us very detailed, helpful opinions. Yeah. So I suspect that's what's taking so long, but there is never any way to know, especially because we're talking about the final judgment. Most likely we're just going to go straight, I think, to the end of that case. So it could be any time. Hopefully it will be sooner than later. Because I think there's some similar cases in less friendly districts that we'd like to see, Benitez make his decision before those come out.
Absolutely. I do think it'll be worth the wait whenever we get that decision.
I think it will.
Absolutely. Definitely. Well, listen, Anna, thank you again for coming on the program. I hope we get a chance to do this again in the very near future. But most importantly, again, thanks for all that you're doing there out in California and really around the country to protect and strengthen and, again, restore our right to keep and bear arms.
Of course. Happy to do it. Thank you for having me again.
I appreciate Anna joining us on the program. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking to more attorneys from Michel and Associates here in the very near future. Hopefully, Chuck Michel will be able to join us next week talking about what happened in the Seventh Circuit today. Right now, let's turn our attention to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. Actually, before we get to that, when you make choices about where to put your hard-earned dollars, you're supporting not only the company that made the product, but the values and the principles of that organization. It's easier to flip a switch against a company when they blatantly conflict with their values, but do you make an effort to do business with the companies that support what you believe when you can? Do yourself a favor and give my friends at Defender Ammunition Company a shot. These guys are veteran-owned and operated. Every person on their staff is military connected. Huge supporters of the military community. They're backing causes that are actually making a difference in the lives of those that have served. And in fact, all of the profits from Defender Ammunition's logoed gear goes directly to the charities that they support. This company's want to support as well. Their ammo's top-notch. Their customer service is incredible. One of their shipping department actually writes handwritten thank you notes to their customers. Give Defender Ammunition a shot, and I promise you, when you do, you won't be going anywhere else. Check them out at defenderammunition.com. Again, that's defenderammunition.com. All right, so today's good deed of the day we'll get to in a moment, as well as the armed citizen story. But let's start with today's recidivist report, which comes from the state of Chicago again, or the state of Illinois. And sometimes it seems like the state of Chicago. The state of Illinois, where law-abiding gun owners are clearly the bigger threat to the Democratic majority than actual violent criminals like this guy. Highland man sentenced for shooting at woman in truck after a work party. What was the sentence? Well, let's see. Work release and a couple of years of probation. Jose Navarrete, 39 years of age, old enough to know better, pleaded guilty back in April to possession of cocaine and criminal recklessness. He was originally facing attempted murder charges after he got very upset. Apparently, Navarrete was at a work party back in 2021 with the woman and other coworkers. He had too much to drink, and so the woman and another guy decided to drive Navarrete home in his truck. Woman's husband following behind in a cargo van. So as they're taking Navarrete home, according to an affidavit, Navarrete made several sexual advances to the woman, groping her, licking her face. Eventually, the woman hits Navarrete in the face. He responds by trying to choke her, then pulls out a gun, fires a shot so close to her neck that he actually left powder burns there. Bullet goes through the front windshield. Navarrete then threatens to kill the woman as well as the other man in the truck who's driving. He pulls over. Woman gets out as fast as she can, leaving her cell phone behind, leaving her glasses behind, runs to her husband's car. Navarrete, meanwhile, demands that the guy behind the wheel continue to drive him home. According to an affidavit, the driver was, quote, beaten and threatened. by Navarrete. When they get to Navarrette's home, the woman and her husband had actually followed behind to make sure their coworker was okay. I guess both coworkers were okay. Another fight breaks out. One grabs a ladder from the van, hits Navarrete in the head, finally knocking him unconscious. The coworker who was driving the van had to fire his own gun as a warning shot at one point. Then after Navarrete was knocked out, they were able to take his gun from him, leave the scene, and call 911. State trooper corroborated some of the woman's story. She was making a traffic stop apparently at the time, and she saw the woman jump out of the truck and run to the nearby van. When authorities showed up at Navarrette's home, he refused to come out for a while. Eventually he did, though he threatened to kill police officers at the scene. When officers impounded his pickup truck, they found a bag with 24 grams of cocaine, a suspected steroid, as well as hypodermic needles. Navarrete originally charged him with attempted murder, criminal confinement, possession of cocaine, criminal recklessness and battery by means of a deadly weapon, strangulation, sexual battery, and unlawful possession of a syringe. All which are felony offenses and could have put him in prison for years. But instead, a judge accepted a plea deal that calls for 2 years of work release, another 3 years on probation, and the possibility of having to complete a drug and alcohol program. Navarrette's defense attorney said, listen, this is the first time he's ever been in trouble with the law, which may be, but I mean, come on, this is some pretty serious offenses here. This isn't like, well, I mean, Your Honor, he ran a stop sign. Or even, yeah, Your Honor, he was caught with a joint in his pocket, but this is his first offense. Most people's first offenses don't involve charges of attempted murder. But the judge accepted the plea deal. So Navarrete will do no serious time behind bars. Hopefully, he gets the help that he needs to turn his life around, but he should be incredibly grateful for the sweetheart deal he was given. And Democrats should really be thinking, and I know they won't, but they really should be thinking about the criminal justice system that they've set up, where a violent offender like Mr. Navarrete can walk away with probation and work release, and yet somebody facing the charged with the crime of possessing a large capacity magazine could be looking at more serious time behind bars. All right. Today's armed citizen story, Fort Smith, Arkansas. Don't have a ton of details about this yet because it happened on Wednesday, but hopefully we'll learn more information as time goes on here. What we do know is that police were called out to a home in South Fort Smith on Wednesday night for reports of an intruder. When they got there, they found that a man had been shot. Police were told he was breaking into the residence when the homeowner fired in self-defense. Police reported that all parties and witnesses, quote, were accounted for, so I believe the guy was acting alone. The investigation continued on Wednesday night. So far, again, Fort Smith police have not released details about the suspect, anyone inside the home, or the homeowner who defended themselves, or perhaps their family members, against this would-be intruder. Hopefully, we'll learn more information, and we will pass that on to you as it becomes available. But right now, this does appear to be a case of armed self-defense there in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Finally, today, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, police officer in Blue Springs, Missouri, who helped save a woman's life while on the job the other day. And man, you want to talk about a scary situation. Sarah Russell was on patrol. She had just left a call when she saw a woman on the side of the road flag her down. So Russell pulls over. As she's getting out, the woman runs to her car, comes out with a gun, points the gun at her own head, and threatened to take her life. Officer Russell said she immediately called for backup and then began to talk to the woman, pleading with her to put the gun down. She said she tried to give information about herself to figure out why the woman was feeling the way she was, saying she wanted to help in any way she could. She said it was terrifying. She said they were having such a hard time. They thought it was their only option, that they had to get out of the situation that they were in. Russell told KCTV, as a police officer, my favorite thing to do is to help people, and they needed my help. I ended up being at the perfect place at the perfect time. She spoke to the woman for about 20 minutes, which she said felt more like a lifetime. She said everything lined up for me to make contact with that party, to give her my heart and soul, into talking them down so they did not take their life. And Russell was successful. Again, after about 20 minutes, the woman agreed to lower the gun. Situation came to a peaceful conclusion. A woman taken into custody, and hopefully she's going to get the help that she needs so that she doesn't ever find herself feeling the way she felt and feeling like there was no other option. Russell said, I couldn't believe they decided to listen and consider those other options, because during the whole incident, it seemed like there was not going to be a good outcome. She said to see a good outcome from something so awful was amazing. And again, it's thanks to the life-saving efforts of Officer Sarah Russell there in Blue Springs, Missouri. Thank you, Officer Russell, for your very good deed. And listen, I know life can be overwhelming for all of us at times. So if you ever get to the point where you're feeling, again, like you've got no good options, please do everyone in your life a favor. Call 988. That's the National Suicide and Crisis Hotline. It's open 24 hours a day. You can even text them if you're more comfortable doing that. But we need you here. So, again, if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, know that you are not alone, and there are folks who want to help. That is going to do it for this edition of Barvir Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program. As always, I'm looking forward to being back with you again on Monday. Yes, we're not taking July 3rd off. No way. We're going to do Tuesday instead for Independence Day. But we will be back again on Monday with a brand new edition of Cam & Company. In the meantime, don't forget to check out BarvierArms.com throughout Friday and the weekend. We're going to keep you covered on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. And I would encourage you to become a VIP member as well. That way you get the exclusive content, the news stories analysis that we give to our VIP members to say thank you and to show how grateful we are for your continued support. All you have to do is go to BarvierArms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on your VIP membership. Again, we thank you so much for your support for what we do here at Barvir Arms. Looking forward to being back with you again on Monday. But until then, be well, be safe, and be free.